The NHLPA has a new executive director, and we have some instant analysis coming your way. This instant analysis is brought to you by Tylenol Rapid Release Gel Caps. Rapid Release for rapid relief. So, Stephen Whyno from the Associated Press, national hockey writer, thanks so much for doing this for us. We really appreciate it. We've tasked you with explaining to me and us who exactly is Martin J. Walsh.
Well, Marty Walsh is not the hockey guy that a lot of people expected to get this job running the Players Association. He was the Secretary of Labor under the Biden administration, the first cabinet secretary of the Biden administration to leave his position since getting appointed in 2021. Longtime mayor of Boston, and before that was in the House of Representatives. A big-time law background, a guy who was head of labor unions and who comes from a labor family from his time in Massachusetts. A big hockey fan of the Boston Bruins, but really a politician through and through, someone who's been a major voice in the labor movement in Massachusetts and the United States for decades.
Let's get the conspiracy theories going. Big Boston Bruins fan, former mayor of Boston. I can already see the conspiracy theories rolling through a bunch of different fan bases. Hey, I'm looking at what Marty J. Walsh has done, and now I'm looking at what he plans to do. What do you think the first order of business for Walsh will be, or hors d'oeuvres of business will be?
The first thing is getting a World Cup of hockey together, and that's something that Don Fehr and Gary Bettman and Bill Daly and the IIHF have been working on for a few years now, and was derailed by Russia's war in Ukraine and unable to host one in 2024. The first immediate thing is trying to make sure that's in place for 2025. After that is the Olympic agreement in 2026, and it's something that's written into the collective bargaining agreement that Don Fehr helped negotiate, and the extension of in 2020 when they can finish the season in the playoff bubbles. But it's something that everybody from the IOC to the IHF on down want to get wrapped up as soon as physically possible. We're not far away from kind of where the deadlines are for that. And then I think he's going to turn his attention to bargaining, and 2026 is when the CBA expires. And that'll be the real order of business of why the PA wanted a labor guy and not a hockey person in this job.
You mentioned Donald Fehr, and that was actually kind of leaning towards what I wanted to ask you next. What was the reason that the NHLPA decided they wanted to move on from Donald Fehr, and what is Fehr's legacy going to be within the PA?
Well, it was time, and Don Fehr had been in the position since late 2010. He had gotten them through the 2013 and 2020 collective bargaining talks, and it was even with the Kyle Beach situation, and I know a lot of people are going to point to that as one of the reasons why he's exiting the PA. And it might be a small reason, because Kyle Beach did say Don Fehr did not do anything about my report back in 2010 and 2011. And the NHLPA did a full investigation saying Don Fehr was not at fault. It was a series of miscommunications, but it will be looked at as part of kind of the legacy in general of Don Fehr, the PA, the Chicago Blackhawks, of how the Kyle Beach situation in 2010 and 11 were mishandled. And I think Don Fehr's legacy goes a lot hand in hand with Gary Bettman's, and the fact that NHL players had gone to the Olympics every cycle until 2018, did not go then, obviously did not go in 2022 because of the pandemic. So there's a lot of good in that Don Fehr was able to keep a lot of things in the players' side in a lot of these CBA talks, got them through the pandemic, but also some negatives in terms of the Olympics and the Kyle Beach situation.
All right, you mentioned the Olympics. We've mentioned that a couple of times now, so just one more quick question for you. How long do you expect Marty Walsh to stick in this role? You mentioned 2026 when the new CBA, when there will be a CBA that will be up for renegotiation. Do you expect him to be there in the position with the PA for that long?
I would assume so. This was not a move made for the short term. And look, you don't leave a presidential administration in the U.S. and a cabinet job for a short-term job. And this is something that Marty Walsh, as a hockey fan, looks at this and sees this is a long-term landing spot for him. Even if the administration, even if President Biden were not still in office in a couple of years, he now has a long-term job to be able to really lead this organization. And it's a big reason why the PA wanted a labor guy in this spot, is to go toe-to-toe with Gary Bettman in what might be Gary Bettman's last negotiation as commissioner, and have someone who can go there and represent the players on behalf of a huge organization that has a lot of different pieces from veterans down to rookies.
Well, you're representing all hockey journalists extremely well, because that was a clear and concise way to surmise who Marty Walsh is. Stephen Whyno, we thank you very much for this. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.